never met someone who deserves the day the way that you do. Joseph, it's time to get ready and the spotlight's shining down upon you. Joseph, so be fair, hold firm. I'm on my way, yeah, here it comes. And I'm delivering a wish to you, so get ready, from every peak and valley they're telling you to get ready, 'cause here it comes. It's on the way. It's a celebration across the nation.
Joseph Jaffe. Why does that name sound so suspiciously familiar? Maybe because your secret screen name is Not Famous for You. What do you mean by not famous for you, Joseph? Chris Hansen here of Hansen versus Predators. To catch a predator and have a seat with Chris Hansen. Now, Joseph Jaffe, I'm going to need you to have a seat right over there. I see some suspicious activity. Something about a television show, doing interviews, 200 guests, something like that. But Joseph, you are not famous. And the people on your show, well, they're not infamous like my shows. But remember, Jaffe is not famous. So let's keep it that way. I'll be watching and listening. Behave.
Am I being overconfident? Am I becoming complacent about complacency?
I think you are.
Oh, he's not the Messiah, he's just a very naughty boy.
Yeah, I've got big ears.
Brian just wanted to see anyone now. Piss off!
That's the one. Because you literally complete me, and we complete each other.
You've obviously encountered discrimination in your own life by virtue of being Australian. So
Hey, Manuel Kemp was a real pissant who was very rarely stable.
I don't want to get too gushy, but I might just be saying you complete me, D. P&G now stands for Pritchard and Good.
Branding is not a bad blind date. Look at you! You are insane!
How did I do that?
You're
How
insane!
did I do that?
You're insane! 2023. We made it. Barely, with some bumps and bruises and scrapes, but we made it. We're still in the game. We have a chance to win, but we're not going to win it by working harder. We're going to win it by working smarter. Actually, I kind of want to work harder and smarter in 2023, but not just being able to punch in and punch out. I want to be able to do what I love and love what I do. I always say this show, for example, is not a labor of love. It's a love of labor. And I think everything we do, we want to avoid burnout. We have to love our labor. We're going to be discussing these and similar thoughts when Mr. John Hall is on the show. I met John in Vegas with Mr. Len Herstein, who you saw making a little cameo, mocking my big ears in the intro. John was one of the keynotes, dare I say the keynote. How about that? Let's build him up. The keynote. I was a keynote, but he was the keynote. One thing I noticed about John was very, very different to most people, maybe all people, is an unbelievable generosity, a spirit of generosity, of grace, graciousness. All he wanted to do was help people that were sitting in the audience, help his fellow speakers, help me. I'm still waiting to be helped by him, but the problem is that apparently I need a lot of help. So even John Hall, he's like, I'm not a miracle. I'm not a miracle worker, damn it. But John will be on the show, and we're going to talk about so many interesting things associated with growth, business growth, personal growth, because if you ain't growing, then you are not living, you are not moving forward. So more on that soon. But first, in keeping with my guest and a theme today, I want to talk to you about this idea of priorities. The thing about priorities is the ability to actually have this self-awareness, I guess, in terms of understanding what is important. Now, look, that might sound obvious, intuitively obvious, like we kind of have an idea what is important in life, or do we? You know, we came into 2020, and did we really have our priorities set or our priorities right? Were we chasing fame and fortune and status? And as I like to say, hoarding, not holding money or financial gain. What was the point? What's the point in being able to hoard all this money, all this wealth, assuming we have it, only to then have to pass it on to squabbling children or maybe a cat when we pass on? Is that a priority? Did we not just have the most incredible moment, not a pleasant one, but a moment nonetheless, when the whole world seemed to be on the same prioritization page to be able to determine what was important in life, in our lives, in life in general? This is an opportunity now to prioritize as 2022 ends and 2023 begins, an opportunity for us to look back, to pause, to introspect, to self-reflect, to be able to account, to take toll, and to figure out exactly what we need to do, where we need to go, who we are, who we were meant to be in the future. A different kind of prioritization. A prioritization perhaps that uses a new algorithm, not an AI-based algorithm, but an algorithm focused on humanity, on heart, on soul, on connection, on friendship. We are losing friends at the moment, on countering loneliness, isolation, social media addiction. So take the bull by the horns, my friends, and prioritize your life. Schedule your life around what is important. And if you don't know at this stage what's important, well, you know that I'm only a comment, a click, or a call away. And now it's time for a click into Mr. John Hall. And I love it when I don't get a bio initially from my guest, because it allows me to be a little bit sneaky and instead say, I don't need to read, I don't need no stinking bio when I have this. Please sit back and relax and watch 1 minute and 42 seconds of John Hall goodness.
Speaking isn't a hobby or a job, it's a passion. It allows me to truly help a group of people become more successful. I'm not the speaker who flies in and out just to make a quick speech. I'm going to get a point to show up early and stick around so I can be a real resource for the audience.
PR and content marketing are affecting recruiting, investor communication, employee retention, a lot of those areas, like just actually employee training. One of our employees started the other day and they said, I've read about 100 of your articles and I felt more prepared for this job than I ever have. That's huge with employee training.
I see a lot of people that have these barriers that say, I don't want to do this because either I don't want to be egotistical or there's some other barrier. So I want to challenge people to take a step forward and have companies not only have it be a focus for them, but also invest in their employees.
Don't take clients on and don't get involved in things when it's not a good fit. Turn down business. I mean, we turn down a good deal of, or a lot of our business because there's a better fit. So think about that. Declaring yourself a thought leader is not good. You have to earn thought leadership.
Welcome to the show, Mr. John Hall.
Hey, buddy. I hadn't watched that in a while, so I was like, "Oh man, this is good to see. I need to redo that."
Yeah, and it says 2018. So now that let this be your prioritization to just edit the thing and say 2023 now with minty fresh breath.
Yeah.
I loved it.
So hopefully, I've learned some since then. So maybe I'm smarter. I don't know. Maybe I'm not. So we'll see.
Well, there are a few things that I could immediately just, launch into. First of all, I love the fact that the quote from Inc. was one of the, most influential people, one of the best people that you've never met. And I love that because I kind of feel like in a way that's my story too. It's this idea of like, being able to say it's the best kept secret, or this is the best business show that no one is watching, or not enough people are watching. There's something about the underdog in there that I just loved.
That came from a panel I was on where there was 3 people who were pretty influential in media, and you would know these people. Like one was like a Bloomberg type major site managing editor, and one of the questions that they asked was who was the most. It was a young group we were speaking to. I forgot the actual event, but it was like their questions were like what you would ask when you're 21. It was like, and the question was, who do you think is the most influential in media? And I turned to look at these people, and they turned to me and they pointed, and I was actually, it was a really nice, like, proud moment, because I was like, that's cool. These are people that I've looked up to as I've grown in the media space. And the kid asked, well, how did that happen? And I said, honestly, in media, just like other industries, there's a lot of like selfish people that are always about them, that are like, hey, what can you do for me? They go to Fortune, Inc., Entrepreneur, Fast Company, the Wall Street Journal, and say, hey, cover me, what can I do? And what I did just simply was different. And I always went into these media sites and I said, how can I help you? How can we look out for you and your best interest? What's important? And it kind of changed, the relationships. And I think with some of these relationships, they looked at me as somebody who was truly helpful, who cared about them rather than always asking for them. One of the sites I was on there, we had helped advise them on the organic traffic, and it doubled in a 6-month period. And so I think that those are the things that it's funny you brought that up, because I think one of the key things that I've learned is that when you come at a relationship engaging, looking out for others, don't just think of what's in it for me. It makes you naturally influential, even by not like going for it. Is that, when you do need something with these people, they're there for you, because it's so unusual in the, especially media space, for someone to come at it. And it wasn't a secret. It was just Midwestern values that I was raised on. My parents raised me that way, and my friends raised me that way too. So that's funny you said that.
I learned a lot about Midwestern values. Actually, my daughter goes to school at WashU, at Washington University in St. Louis, and I found out that Midwestern people are actually quite kind and quite nice. It's actually part of the culture, and it's weird to someone who lives on the coast. The A-type intense personalities, and suddenly, well, wait a second, you actually believe this? You actually implement this? You actually live by this? It's pretty cool. I like it.
Yeah, anywhere there's going to be butt heads, whether you're in the Midwest or whatever, that, so you can find them anywhere. But in the Midwest in particular, there's a little more informalness with looking out for others. With certain things, and when I visit New York, or we had an apartment up there, and it's just interesting how there's a lot of nice people in places like that too. But in reality, is that some of the things that I would do that was informal, like neighborly, was looked at as weird. And I remember some of the neighbors there be like, man, you are way too informal. And I'm like, well, this is how we are. So yeah, I think it's a cool thing to be where we're at, because it kind of, I think that naturally people want to have real connection. And fortunately, kind of one of the things that I run into a lot is people just kind of want to strip the BS and say, hey, let's have a real relationship. Let's look out for each other. And it happens a lot around here.
It's funny, because even when I think about dress, now in this new normal, I was watching Seth Meyers, his show. I think it's called what is it's so crazy, like Late Show is, or the Late Show is Seth Meyers. It's funny, like I don't even remember. Here's another thought. This is completely random. I had this like crazy moment the other day where I realized I don't know a single television show on a Thursday. Like nothing on cable, on like from must-see TV and Friends and Seinfeld and ER and all of that. I cannot tell you one show on a Thursday. I don't even know any show on any days anymore. I was just thinking how crazy the world is and how much the world has changed. So just like complete, like random non sequitur. But when we think about, I mean, isn't that crazy?
It's nuts. I mean, I think that everything, like I was joking around about my own book. I wrote pre-pandemic and people were like, oh, like, and somebody asked for it the other day. I was like, hey, there's like 60% of it that I still am for because the world's changed. 40% I wouldn't agree with at this point just because how things have changed in content, in media, and in how we engage each other. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that in reality, we all need to reset. It's perfect timing. I mean, right now we're recording this, or early or whatever, but it's around 22, 20, 23, and I think this is a time to reflect when you're running out of the holidays and early in 2023. And I mean, simply put, it's like, don't just do what you've done before. Reassess, look at where the world's going, look at where trends are heading, because they're very different. And we just got a really big push from this pandemic. Didn't just affect like trends in business. It affected how people are trending and what they value, how they interact with each other. And it's wild to me how I mean, things have changed. I mean, people that I used to see as like crazy motivators, like, all over the place in business, are now settling down and realizing families, they probably shouldn't be on a plane for 100 and 20 flights a year, And so I think it's interesting how I've seen so many 180s, with some great, others have been bad, and others have gone through a really difficult time. So I think it's looking at, both sides of that and seeing how you can engage people in the way that's going to build the best relationships and ultimately make you the happiest.
But so going back to, for example, like the story of Seth Meyers, I'm watching him and he's kind of dressed like me. He's wearing a sweater or a hoodie, or Trevor Noah was wearing a hoodie, and it was weird. It's like it didn't land with me. I expect him to wear a suit. I expect him to dress like a penguin in his penguin suit. I expect the tie. I don't expect him, because there's a lack of authenticity. I'm not saying he's not authentic, but I'm saying based on what the brand and based on what has been built, it somehow feels like you couldn't dress up to work today. Whereas in this new normal, we're more comfortable doing it because this is kind of who we are. And so I guess I don't know whether I just need to get used to it, or whether in fact he's encroaching on my territory, but it almost feels
used to it.
So I need to get used to him dressing like a schlumpf.
Yep. Unfortunately, man, fortunately, but the uniqueness about it is we all have these humps to get over right now with like that. Like that's a great example of one that's like not actually affecting your life. It's just something that, you realize, you're like, what's going on here? But there's things that actually affect our life every day that we have to get over these humps, how people communicate to us, people's own brandings, how they've changed. Branding has changed ridiculously with some people in the last 2 to 3 years. And it's almost, it takes some bit to get used to. But I think that for me, I mean, I've met Seth a couple times. Like he speaks at an event that I spoke at several times. Good guy, and I think that he's probably just at a point where when you deal with those moments where you're, I mean, look at me. It's like I'm dressed like super comfortably. I used to wear suits and stuff like that.
You couldn't get dressed for an interview? You schlumpf?
Nah, sorry, man. That's how it is these days. Because like for me, I've learned that the more that people are themselves and comfortable and let down their barriers, the more you get to know them, not the persona, but and I think that people value authenticity. They feel more connected.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the pandemic showed that, and it unloaded, or it unleashed some people to be a little more themselves. Some bad, honestly. Some people somehow forgot their filter, but others are just being a little more, what they truly are. It might not be their brand of what you thought was authentic, but they're being more like themselves.
Well, give me an example of some of the bad, in terms of the filters, and then I'd like to kind of go back to the idea of humps. I love the idea of these humps, and talk about some of the humps that we need to get over and we need to kind of get used to. So what are some of the bad changes? Because, and John, the context of this, I think, is this idea of, you know, I said at the start of this whole crazy period, I hope, I pray that we don't go back to our bad old ways. I hope that we can come through this with a new prioritization of what's important in life. And I feared, and I think in many cases, a lot of people have gone back to the bad old ways. So what are some of these bad filters or examples? And then if you could address the idea of some of like some examples of the humps that we need to get over and get used to.
Yeah, so I guess the initial one is that people, especially with what happened politically during the pandemic with Trump, Biden, combined with the pandemic, people almost like had this, oh, like I can come out of the closet in a way that I can be more aggressive, or like this, like I've been like shielding a lot of these things. And now all of a sudden I can have these strong opinions and it's just going to be okay. But I think that the polarizing view of how you, the polarizing view of how you look at your branding and like how you look as the person you are, it can also change. I mean, you saw that with even like the Will Smith thing that happened. The first like 30 minutes of when he slapped Chris Rock, people were like, oh my God, yeah. And there was like, I mean, there was actually people in support of it. But then like, actually weeks later and whatever, obviously you saw that was something that ended up being a very negative branding, thing that resulted, or not. I mean, it's a reaction. I don't want to get into the argument of, what he did, but in reality is that I think people, the more you polarize, the more you like, have this feeling of going really strong one side, and you might feel comfortable because you feel passionate about something. It can absolutely polarize you with other people and not connect with them. And so I think that what I tell people in their content moving forward, so that's kind of like the general view, but the what we're dealing with a lot of is industry leadership positioning. And sometimes feel like, well, to be an industry leader, I need to take a very strong polarizing stance. And that's just not true. You want to take a stance where you can have opinions, but you're respectful. And you stay respectful no matter how much people come at you, and you just keep on saying, hey, this is the type of company, the type of people we want to be, and also we don't want to offend, we don't want to hurt, we don't want to do this, and we're going to try the best. Now, it's impossible as a brand and as a company not to do that moving forward, because someone is going to have a problem with something you're doing. But I think that's what's important about getting guidelines, saying, here's what we want to own in the industry. This is how we want to be positioned. This is the type of companies and people that we are. And I think that the more you kind of use a North Star and guide that, that's where we see a lot of success with companies, that they like truly want to own something. They have good intentions. They're genuine. And they're not just trying to, like, I've seen people do campaigns and things that are, hey, like, we're going to take this stance and it's going to be, and it works for like 3 months, but then it backfires when one of their new clients finds out they took some stance that was like really polarizing, and then they lose that. So I think that, like I said, is that keeping, your North Star, your brand guidelines, the type of company people you want to be, aligning that with what you own and creating content that supports that, that's helpful. I think I always try to think is like, is this content helpful, or are you just trying to get views? You might be successful in this one article just trying to get views, but in reality, you're going to hurt your long-term brand, and you want to stay top of mind with the right people. So the more you kind of stay top of mind in the right way, the more that when they do need to pull the trigger, they'll come to you.
And it comes back to authenticity as well, authenticity and endurance in terms of staying power. Instead of going to where the puck is heading, it has to be more like you need to go to where the North Star is heading, which of course never really moves. But as opposed to what is maybe cool or relevant or faddy at the time. But what about some of the humps that you spoke? What are some of the things that we need to get over and get used to?
Well, I think that frustration can happen with how like generational changes and also people changes. We had a deal this year. I'm not lying that it was a big deal. Like when I mean big deal, we're talking millions and millions and millions of dollars, and it fell through because someone just decided that at this massive brand that they didn't want to work there after 25 years, and it messed up the whole deal. And it was extremely lucrative for us. And it was just this person's life had changed and they adjusted. And and I think you can look at that and be like really like upset, really frustrated, or whatever, and get down on yourself. But in reality is that like things can change really quickly. Like the next week we were just looking at is like what's the next step? What are we doing to overcome? We weren't basking in and being furious or frustrated. So I do think that things can change really quickly in this new environment. You can have someone immediately switch gears on you. And I think being prepared for that, I think perseverance is a huge thing moving forward with how we persevere through these situations, because you're dealing with so many factors that like post-pandemic, you're dealing with mental health, you're dealing with people changing how they viewed life the last 2 years. So I think that that's a massive hurdle that we're going to deal with relationships and companies. Like some like people that have like tried to get out of agreements with some of our companies and things like that. I would have never expected it in the last 2 years, but in reality, there was just such a shock to the system, and also we're just being hit by different things that are affecting people's mindset. So I think that it's creating the mental strength amongst your team and within yourself to say, look, this stuff is going to happen. I accept that this is going to happen, but I'm going to be a solutions oriented person that just keeps on, moving forward. And that's where, like I said, a lot of the times we're dealing with like companies who want to be the industry leaders. And we've seen it time and time after again, where the people and the companies that are leading the industry through content, through marketing are the ones that have strong perseverance, strong mental strength through those, don't let those things get them down. And obviously those challenges, though I was saying, it's happening more and more. And so I think that that's just a key thing that we have to get past. And you're just going to see people thrive if they can. Now, if they get in the weeds and they get frustrated and, it's just going to be mentally draining. And I think like running out of this thing, mental strength, being well capitalized in the people, I think that there's going to be some massive winners out of this. Even if we have a recession this year, I'm not scared of a recession because it gives us time to build. We prepared for, we have a war chest for things like that. But I think it's going to set us up for, even if there is one in 2025 or 2026, that we're setting up for a massive growth where a lot of the other people just aren't thinking that way. So like I said, I think getting over those initial hurdles and then planning and accepting it and then still persevering and planning for the best. And that's going to be the real winners.
I heard a couple of key words and ideas in that. The first is this concept of frustration, because there's patience and impatience and endurance and perseverance. And you mentioned some of them, but I think the word frustration is in particular an important one for people to bear in mind. The ability for us to not give people their space, give them their time, and allow for time and allow for these changes, like these generational changes. In some cases, it requires unlearning. In other cases, it requires our ability to give grace and give space, even if it sounds very foreign to us, even if we generationally didn't have these opportunities or luxuries or however we want to perceive them. And I just think that people really should pause and pay attention to this idea of frustration, because it's not something. Hey, I've done 420 plus of these interviews. I don't think we've ever had a conversation about frustration as much. And I think there's something there, John.
Oh, it's a massive, it's like a book that I love to recommend is Essentialism, written by a friend, Gray. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but one of his strategies is, this guy has coached everyone from Steve Harvey to like some of the busiest people in the world. And his big thing is to, essentialism is to basically get rid of all the distractions. Because if you get rid of all the distractions, it leaves you with what's essential. And I think the same way, frustration is like one of the key things. You can sit there and be like up all night frustrated with the situation. Then you didn't get sleep. Then you're not fresh the next day. With a relationship, you can hurt a relationship just by not just by reacting and having a knee-jerk reaction, being frustrated, and then something you've worked on for 30, 40 years or 20 years or whatever, then is ruined by a reaction. And so I think frustration is a key thing against productivity and effectiveness. And I think that, like, I mean, these days it's funny. You should see how I react to certain things. Something will happen, and it's kind of like the I don't have it on my desk right now. I just cleaned it up, but it's the thing that says things that matter. So things that matter, and then things in your control. So in your control. All right. And the only thing I can focus on, or you see the little, it says things that matter, things in your control. And so this is my world. So like in reality, when a company that just failed is acting like a crazy person to one of our companies and saying they're trying to get rid of, out of agreements, not pay, this is like it matters. So it's over here, but it's not in my control. So I don't allow myself to get frustrated unless it's something that matters and is in my control. And so that middle part, sometimes there is like, I'm flawed and I screw up a little bit. So when it comes in here, I allow myself to get frustrated because that's what actually trains me to be a better version of myself, because when it's when it's in my control, I should perform better. But the other things, I'm just like, whatever, like in reality, let's move past it. What's our solution? How are we building from this? And, how are we becoming better? And so I think that's a very,
I love that.
Yeah. I think the people who thrive after this thing will have that sort of mindset, or they'll be lucky with timing or other things. But
we also hear a lot. I mean, about this idea of limiting mindsets and abundance mindsets, and I'm wondering maybe if there's a new mindset that can come out of even this conversation, which is maybe something like, I don't know, the prioritized mindset, or the because this whole idea of when somebody says, I'm scared, I'm afraid, I don't know, I'm concerned, to just point a finger and say, that's a limiting mindset, bad limiting mindset, versus abundance, which can be also euphoric and can conquer the world and bring it in and kumbaya. Maybe if we think about it, things that matter versus things we can control, that little bit in the middle, maybe there's a third mindset, which is the prioritized mindset.
Yeah, no, I like that. And I think it naturally, that's kind of like the essentialism idea of, prioritization of what's essential. I think that you're right. You're kind of combining a couple, whatever theories or content themes. And yeah, I mean, like once you kind of identify that, because even in that middle sphere, there's prioritization. There's things that actually should take a higher priority that both matter and are in our control. So I think you're right, is that maybe, hold on, we'll do this. Got my amazing.
I love the doodles.
We're gonna put it even like a darker circle right in the middle.
I even have music for you, so while you're drawing, we can.
Hey man, that was me drawing fast too. So
I was hoping you would actually go. I was hoping you'd go slower because I love playing the music. Something else in your introduction, and before we even get in, because I want to talk about 2023, I want to talk about these trends. I want to talk about that which matters and that which we can control from a corporate and a personal standpoint. But something else struck me, which is this idea of thought leadership is something you earn. And I would love for you to talk to that. But before you do that, I also want to point out something else, which is I love the fact that this employee who came and interviewed, having read all your articles, had said, I kind of feel already prepared. And I've never thought about the fact that you can look at it two ways. One is we write these articles, this thought leadership, all of this LinkedIn, and you have like this ridiculous LinkedIn newsletter. Please tell me how I can get to 8 billion people that follow you apparently and subscribe to your LinkedIn newsletter. I have just under 2,000 in about 3 weeks, which happened quickly as well. But there are two parts to it, right, John? One is the fact that they took that, first of all, that you did it and you could brief and you could actually educate and make sure that they were applying at the right person applying at the right company. But the other one is kind of like almost the onus is on someone looking for a job to go and do their due diligence and find these articles and get all of these gems and these Easter eggs that are just in plain view and plain sight?
Yeah, so the LinkedIn thing, yeah, I was one of the early members of that. Fortunately, with what our company does, we have a really solid relationship with a lot of the people at LinkedIn, and so I think there's a first user advantage if I'm being honest there, because I was one of the early people. Because we, as a company, we work with LinkedIn in different ways, and understanding the kind of the new tactics and trends and things like that. So I think that was part of it, and then also it's just the consistency. It's like compound interest. I describe us, getting a following, and it's not 8 billion, it's 330,000 or something like that. So not there, but maybe.
Thank you for clarifying.
But yeah, I think that the way you look at it is almost like it's not just people who have a really good retirement that are even like, there's some blue collar workers that have some great retirements because they started early and then they stayed consistent. Same thing with things like this. Started early. Now, if you don't start early, as long as you are consistent, that's the key thing at some point. And so for me, it's just simply like, there's content that's just as good out there for sure. I try to make it consumable and engaging, but same time is that there's some people that write better pieces out there. But I think people just like, because I stay consistent. It's easy to read. It's ones where it's, like I said, compounding interest, where some people will follow, then they'll tell 4 friends, then they'll tell friends. So I didn't grow because some viral thing overnight. I grew following because I just stayed engaged and, consistently work on that towards the long run. Now, the second thing to comment on is that you were talking about how people, when they meet me, they already feel like they kind of know me. That was in a recruiting standpoint. It is interesting. I was at a holiday party on Friday, and some guy, really nice guy and pretty influential here in town, came up to me and was like, "Hey, I feel like we already know each other, and I've read a lot of your content, and like a lot of values align, and and things like that." And I'm like, "Oh, great!" And like we started, on a scale of 1 to 10 of a relationship, you typically, with trust, you walk in at a 1. I'm not saying we walked in with a 10, but we walked in at probably a 3 or 4, and allowed us to immediately, have a better discussion. And so it's interesting when you talk about the ROI of content, some of the things we do with thought leadership and PR and things like that. And the first thing that people look at is quantifiable, organic traffic. So it's like, how are we creating content, creating leadership to create leads, revenue? And I completely get that. I like having a quantifiable metrics when you're dealing with what our space is, which is growth marketing. But I look at also the qualitative metrics are just massive there. The idea that when a recruit meets me, one of the recruits, I was on an email or an interview the other day where the woman said, your book was being taught in my class. Or maybe it was an article. It was something with the content was being taught in the class. And so from a standpoint of her feeling connected to the company and feeling, the credibility in what we're doing was like there. So that was awesome. On the other side, with that guy on, Friday at the holiday party, that's a good connection for me. And if he wouldn't have read the content and walked in and we were just introduced, it would have started at a 1. And so in a 30-minute conversation, we probably went from a 3 to a 6. And if we didn't have that content there, it probably would have been a 1 to a 2 in the relationship. So I think that, it's really valuable to, when you're trying to engage people consistently, written content, video content, whatever you're doing from a content marketing side of things is very, very important in that, whether it's personal or company goals. It keeps you top of mind, gains your trust. It's more than quantifiable organic traffic. It's also these qualitative benefits that are massive as well.
And also, just to kind of put a cherry on top, when you create content, you don't always know who's reading, who's watching, who's listening. Even if one person is, you don't know who that person is or who they might play, what role they might play. I always used to use the term asynchronous intimacy, especially in the early days of social media. This idea of you're building relationships with people, one that feels very real, that feels very intimate, because you feel like you know them, because you've had an opportunity to get to know them. And yet it is completely asynchronous. It's not actually happening at the same place and at the same time. And it can be very, very powerful.
Yeah, agreed.
So what about this idea of earning thought leadership as opposed to commanding it, as opposed to saying, I am a branding ninja?
Oh, I mean, and some people, I mean, maybe it's just not my style to do the ninja thing, but like from a standpoint of like, because some people have had success doing that in the past. I do think that the moving forward, now granted, I think it's different per platform. TikTok and some of the newer trending platforms like that. Yeah, you can get wins in that, and for influencer and consumer influencers, you can do that. I tend to be on the business side of things, like more building companies, not just individuals. Like thought leadership is an aspect of is a big aspect of what we do, but like that's where my background is kind of gone towards. So I don't want to say that doesn't work, but for us, when it comes to companies, having the commitment that, like I said, we work with companies that, like, the first thing we want them to say is we want to own our industry. You see it on our site right there. You basically, okay, great. So what does that mean? Well, there's a variety of things. You can, like, product, great product. Like Apple is an industry leader in product. Now that's not our area of what we help. We're not product geniuses. But then you go to the other side of it, which is how your brand is, looked at in the industry digitally, how it's perceived, how your leaders are perceived, how likable is the brand. All those things factor in, and also how you have owned your digital real estate. So what I mean by digital real estate, because there's several meanings of it, it's when people are searching online, are they running into your brand, your knowledge, your experience, your companies out in the real world? Because in reality, like, that's the direction that Google's going with their useful content update, is that, like, they're basically saying, we want you to earn this. There's no hacks anymore. They've caught so many, like, trust me, we've seen every single SEO hack there's been, and they're catching on, and they know it. There's smart people working there. So this natural, commitment to, hey, we want to dominate the space. Our specific areas are this combination of PR, SEO, and thought leadership. The reason why we focus on those is because, just think about it logically. When you have good on-site content, or the site that you own, like, or on one of your own sites, whether we kind of will put LinkedIn or Medium, as long as you have full control, you have that area. Okay, well, that is like the place you're going to convert the most, because it's a place you can put the right calls to actions, you can do the right things. But how do you build credibility and traffic? Well, the credibility is through the PR of actually getting other influencers, contributors, writers, journalists talking about that content, sourcing it, so that you're looked at as leader. Then you look at the bottom, like, let's say, circle on a Venn diagram, and then you have search. That's going to be your distribution factor, because in reality, there's paid, there's all these tactics that you can do for distribution. It used to be PR was a main one, but it's less and less. It's been watered down a little bit. So that's why you got to combine that SEO for distribution, because if you pick the right keywords, the right things that people, and it's not even keywords anymore, it's keyword clusters and areas. So that's kind of the things when you look at, like, how you're doing thought leadership. It used to just be this one circle. Now it's these other factors that are playing in, so that you can maximize the ROI with not just organic traffic, but also sales, reputation, and all that. So it's not rocket science, but it has to be effectively aligned and executed.
I love it, and it actually does speak very much to capabilities, which says it's, as you say, custom or concierge SEO. There's digital PR, there's content strategic planning. It's not just because it's on your website, but it's the fact that you can't. And I love it now. I didn't understand. I didn't see the connection before, but now I do. You can't game your way or hack your way to thought leadership, and it's not just about being even top of page. It's about going deeper and being able to back up the promises with action, with case studies, with use cases, with process, so on and so forth.
Yeah, and we, like, believe in it so much. That's where, like, most of we have a service side where companies, like, we service for a fee, have that service for a fee, but a lot of our money is made on our investment side, because, like, we believe in this stuff so much that we invest in companies given the strategy. So it's like I put my money where my mouth is. It's like, this is a company, and these days with the data, you can look and see what opportunities there are in your space. Like, there's great tools like MarketMuse, SEMrush, Ahrefs, BuzzSumo. We use, there's just tons of them out there. You can look at it and you can basically be like, oh, sweet, like, this is the traffic, here's the formula to get that, here's the opportunity, here's where we're at now, here's where, and like, that's what I love about the data that's come out, is that, you know, I can talk to someone in a 15 to 30 minute time frame and figure out exactly what opportunities, how hard it's going to be, what investment it's likely going to take. And it's probably a degree of margin of error of like 15 to 20%. So I can be wrong, but it's not like terribly wrong. You know, like 10 years ago, if I was going to say, oh, it's going to take this, this, and this, margin of error could be like 50 to 70%. So it's decreased a lot, just because of the data. So yeah, it's a fun thing to do, and that's why we have the investment arm. So, you know, and I think that like any service company should have an investment arm if you're providing a good service, because if you're saying our service helps you grow and add all this value to your company, then we should be able to put our money where our mouth is. And so we do that about once every 4 to 6 months. We invest pretty significantly in a company just to kind of show it's like, look, we believe in these tactics, believe in this. This was one they were raising, made sense, it aligned. But I think it kind of supports the believing in the strategy when you do make the money and then you put it back into, you know, something you believe in.
And so I love the idea of investing in growth. I mean, and data as crumbs, right? I always used to say that consumers leave behind digital crumbs. Today, I've put a little bit of a spin on that, and I call it block crumbs, because these crumbs are not necessarily transient and disappearing. They're now minted on and entered into the public ledger that is the blockchain. So it's a little bit more deliberate. It's a little bit more owned, a little bit more controlled. But the question is whether they are physical, digital, social, mobile, or blockchain enabled. Are we paying attention? So in the time we have left, I would love to talk about and hopefully direct people to pay attention to some of these growth opportunities. And, and in particular, what can we look towards? What can we look ahead for? What can we look forward to in terms of 2023 trends related to company growth?
I mean, 2023, there's a big opportunity because people are pulling off. There's layoffs happening. There's massive openings. Like, this is where, like 2 years ago or a year ago, when the economy, I mean, like there was a lot of money out there. It was hard to differentiate yourself. This is the year, to me, that if you can invest in this stuff, it is a great opportunity, because not everybody, but a lot of people are pulling back. And that means that their rankings will go down. That means that the consistency of content will go down. So I look at this as a massive opportunity. Now, I'm not saying you have to just throw money out, still be, you know, smart about your money and get bang for the buck, you know, type things, you know, strategies. But I think that in 2023, it's exciting because there's starting to be these gaps and opportunities. And I think that, once again, it's about perseverance. It's about planning. It's about, are you being the company that you want to be in the future? Because the big difference for 24, 25, 20, or 2026 is going to be this next year, because people are scared, people are struggling, they're scared of a recession, layoffs, all these things happen. But you know, I think that to me, the trend is to say, okay, let's persevere through this. What can we do to plan effectively so that we're running out of it and we're differentiating ourselves compared to these other people? I think that the things like Google in the last years, with a few updates, it's really interesting how we're seeing the hacks aren't working as much. So the true, like, earning it, which plays to our favor because we've been like this for 3 years. So maybe I'm biased, but like, in reality is that, like, you know, everybody who talked about growth in the past was like, oh, you got to hack this, you got to hack this. Now, I mean, I'm just like, you know, you can consistently compound growth, but this next year is going to be, the trend is just going to be the opportunities will be bigger than usual, just because of the struggle and because people are a little uncertain. So you got to capitalize on it, investing in the people and the right vendors to do it. So, like, if you have a great people in-house, great. Like, if I ever run into a solid in-house team that doesn't need help, I'll high five them. But at the same time, is that deal with people you trust that are going to set you up for, you know, success. And I think, you know, in reality, is like just a level of honesty with each other. I think the last couple of years we were just like, rah, here, we'll do this, take over the world here. But I think that, you know, 2023 is a very good time to develop real relationships. Something that this happened at a car dealership the other day. I bought a car, And the guy could have upcharged, could have done this because he knew I was going to probably spend the money no matter what, just because the car's back ordered like 12 months. But he goes, hey, here, I'm also going to give you this discount. I know I don't have to, but in reality is that, because the demand's there, but in reality, I value the long-term relationship with you. And it just meant the world to me. Like, it was just like the idea that this guy could have gouged me and probably got away with it. But instead, he used this opportunity to look out for me. And he's like, look, I want to develop a relationship with you. I think that in 2023, there will be a massive opportunity for those because people are mentally struggling from, the last couple of years, but at least with the last couple of years of weird, like the tough pandemic stuff and all the challenges financially, the economy was doing well. Now we're, it's a little different thing where we're scared of a recession and things are it's mental health is going to be a challenge here. So I think that being very empathetic towards that, and looking out for it, building relationships, setting it up, everything we're doing is like setting up to have a ridiculous 2025. And even if we break even in this next year, I still would consider, if we do the right moves and set it up
that's a win.
as a massive win.
I love this phrase, by the way. I think there is a book, maybe your next book is going to be called, please look out for John Hall, best-selling author, his next book, which is called I Know I Don't Have to. No, it's a really great idea. And if we're talking to people, when's the last time you did something that you didn't have to?
Yeah.
As opposed to because you ought to, or you wanted to, or you were obliged to, or you were forced to. And the ability actually to signal it is even, I think that works too. I know I don't have to, but I want to do this anyway. I mean, that makes you feel like $1 million.
Yeah, well, even when you have extreme leverage on someone, like they had the leverage on me, and the idea that they had all the leverage and still showed that they value the relationship, I think that is a massive sign of good faith. And I think that he also clearly communicated that what he cared about was the long-term relationship. So he not only handled it right, he put the idea in my head that that's what he values, so that it makes me more inclined to cooperate with that. Fantastic. So I just think that's those are the things that are going to stand out this year. And I think ultimately it's a year of opportunity. People are scared of what's to come in ways I'm not. I think it's a great year for companies and people to basically run a little faster and get ahead of other people and other companies. So I look forward to it, where some others are scared. So that's how I'm looking at trends moving forward.
There is a key phrase which you had said earlier, which is push forward when others are pulling back. Mm-hmm. Well, here's another quote or quotable, which is your quote. I always find a quote for my guests. And your quote is, the key is not to prioritize what's on your schedule, but to schedule your priorities. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you probably know who said that.
No, it's like, I'm a firm believer of this. I think people hijack your schedule and all these things that can.
What does Stephen Covey know about this stuff, by the way?
Yeah, his content aligns with a lot of the stuff that what's funny is that when you talk about Covey and like a variety of even Simon Sinek would start with why. It's like the why, when you talk about prioritization, like the why is such a big factor of that. Like you can basically take people like Stephen, Simon, and even like Greg, who I mentioned, and there's so much overlapping of it. And yet you're right, is like prioritization of I started calendar, I co-founded calendar.com with a friend, and from a standpoint of prioritization and the data we get that helps us prioritize, it's unbelievable how just with slight changes you can legitimately change how significantly how effective you are. And so yeah, I mean, I think I love that quote. I think that it's just something that in reality, it's like when you look at prioritization, how you schedule your priorities. This is it won't show you on this slide, but you can have analytics on calendar where it shows you who you're spending your time with. And it's unbelievable how when I check that, I'm like, why the heck am I spending time? None of these people are priorities. And somehow I'm spending all my time with people that aren't even the right prioritization. So I think that there's, a good opportunity. And even me, I'm a major investor in the scheduling space. And when you look at this, it's like, man, I mean, even I have my flaws. And so we're not perfect. We're all flawed to do it. But I think we just need these constant reminders. Even people listening to this podcast or listen to this right now, it's like, start thinking about, reflect on how you're doing. And then in 3 months, when you're starting to, basically, you become lax with it, then you need a constant reminder and pay attention to either something I say or Covey or, one of the other people out there that are, helping people prioritize the right, the important things, and also just being effective with your time.
Well, you can actually go to calendar.com and start your free trial. John, you said something very important. You said small little changes and small little tweaks can essentially lead to giant, major outcomes. How much have we seen in terms of innovation or the lack thereof in the calendar or the scheduling space specifically? And I heard from, I remember someone was on the show maybe a year and a half ago, and I think they said that their scheduling software didn't allow them to schedule back-to-back meetings. That so little things like that, whether that is self-enforced or imposed or regulated. But what are some of the innovations that you're working on and trends that you're seeing that can allow us again to work smarter, not necessarily harder?
Yeah, so I don't like blanket statements about time because everybody's different. I think you should customize it, and that's why, like, when we are building the tool, we're like for example, depends on what link you send. Like, I have a mentoring link, so that's 15 minutes. It's to give back to younger entrepreneurs and to other people and pay it forward. I can have back-to-back meetings there. I don't need to prep for them. I don't need after, and I'm also donating time. So like, it's not something that, like, back-to-back meetings are perfectly fine. So on that link, it does allow, if there's 2 of them in a row, that it will allow me to schedule. Now, if it's something like it did not allow me to schedule 15 minutes before you scheduled, because it's something where it's like, hey, I just needed to like look at the content you sent, kind of prep a little bit. Now, it wasn't 2 hours of prep, but at least, 10, 15 minutes. So it wouldn't allow me because you were a link that was different. It was more, and it's once again, how you prioritize. I have a prioritization of the links. And what I mean by that is that, like, you can have a link that's like, okay, this is for the mentors. These are for the people I mentor. This is for good friends that I want to make time for. Your link was a catch up link, which it was like an old friend that, trying to catch up, and, we're kind of killing 2 birds with 1 stone, catching up here and also doing this. So you had a specific link. Then my wife has a link which can absolutely trump any of you guys. She has pretty much it can over schedule certain things.
Oh, I love that. Well,
So
actually, that may not be a good thing. Which is like, maybe you tell your wife that she can schedule over, but in actual fact, I'm just kidding.
She doesn't know. So I mean, and I don't think she'll watch this, so she doesn't know that it can do that. But I just do it, and then I get notification.
I love it.
And so she has, once again, she's my number 1 priority, and I want to make that clear. So I think that from when you look at these. And that's why, like, when you're talking about prioritization, like the biggest hack not hack, but the best strategy for prioritization is time blocking combined with prioritization. And so what I would do is whether you, don't sign up for one of our competitors, please, but like, if you sign up for something like Calendar, you create like more than like a certain amount of links. And like, I have 10 links. So I know exactly when I'm getting on a call, the prioritization, just by how the link is, like how it schedules it. I know the like catch up. I know exactly I need to prep for about 15 minutes before. When it's a quick 15-minute chat, I know that that's my mentor link. So I know that one, I don't need to prepare at all. So it's like legitimate. I can look at my calendar, know how much I need to prepare, know how much I need to prioritize it, and it schedules it with those with those things, the custom kind of, breaks and things like that. So like for me, it's number 1 way to prioritize and own your schedule and actually like setting your priorities and all that jazz.
Rule-based systems that are algorithmic, that are automated, potentially AI, but also just inherently human and commonsensical in terms of how we schedule, how we prioritize, how we align. I love that whole breakdown, and hopefully people that are watching this, then you prioritize and you schedule, as opposed to, wait, you're going to draw for me again? Please do. I thought you were going to.
No, I was actually, I was going to, but then there's like, no, but like in reality is I think that if you just basically even going through the exercise of like thinking through, I don't like, even if someone like signs up for a free trial or whatever, going through it and just being like time blocking is an effective exercise. Like the same thing I was going to draw, but it's harder to draw, as a RACI matrix. RACI matrices have, at the top, who are the people that are affected by what I'm doing, and then here are the tasks. And then RACI is like responsible, accountable, and you mark those in the box. So I love like the exercise of like spending a couple hours first doing the scheduling, the calendar.com, and basically being like, here are my links, here are the prioritization, here's like how I'm going to plan out and prioritize who I schedule with, here's what I send out to these people, here's what I send out to these people. So that's great for prioritization, being aware and actually owning your schedule and this. Then the next thing is, the how do my actions affect others around me? And that's where, RACI matrices are great, because and even if you don't keep it updated, it's still just going through the exercise where you're like, this person is affected when I do an article. Well, my blog manager needs to know this, or my vendor, my agency needs to know that this article is live so that they can pitch it out to press. So there's all these different things that these exercises that you can do to be better prioritization, and also, how your actions affect others. And those are two things that I recommend doing if you do have a free morning to do.
I'm actually starting to come down with hives, because I realize how much work I still have to do, and the Everest that I still have to climb. But I know where to start. I'm going to start with calendar.com. I'm going to start with you, John Hall. I love the fact that we were able to catch up after several years and do the show. And for those of you that want to find out more about calendar.com, that's all you have to do. Go to calendar.com, go to relevance.com. If you want to book John to speak, go to johnhallspeaking.com. If you want to subscribe to his newsletter and be the 50 billionth person to subscribe, yes, there are not 50 billion on it. You can do that through this link, or just connect with him on LinkedIn. And I just happened, my producer is whispering in my ear that you've just got a new subscriber to your newsletter, none other than Chuck Norris.
You are Chuck Norris approved.
Have a great 2023. Get off your you-know-what, lead with the front foot, prioritize, schedule, and remember, push forward when others are pulling back. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching the show about hope, positivity, optimism, and if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing, with your host, multiple author, and global keynote speaker, Joseph Jaffe. If you like the show, tell a friend or two. Please subscribe to the show, and if you want to get inside news, previews of upcoming guests, and much more, visit josephjaffe.com/subscribe to sign up for the show's newsletter.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.